Good afternoon, everyone, and it's time for a literature lesson on Transcendentalism. It's been some time since we were working with our iBooks. Right before Christmas, we spent the last few weeks discussing a separate piece, a modern novel by John Knowles. So the last time we really were in the iBooks was when we were covering Edgar Allan Poe and Washington Irving. They had ushered in a time period known as Romanticism, and while we emphasized the darker side of Romanticism, particularly when it comes to a writer like Edgar Allan Poe, we should revisit the basic tenets of Romanticism in general so that we can refresh our memories in terms of what we are to expect when we begin this new unit on Transcendentalism. American Romantics valued imagination over intellect and reason. They celebrated the individual and the pursuit of freedom. And there was this inherent belief that mankind was essentially good, that he was essentially kind, and that all human beings are created equal. This becomes a very important tenet because during this time, which marks usually the 19th century in the United States, a time where you're going to be dealing with equal rights for all people, civil war, women's rights, and all these kinds of things, the Transcendentalists were at the forefront of that idea of equality for all. And there was this deep, abiding love and appreciation and kinship with nature. It was believed by many American Romantics that the source of divinity can be found simply by looking at the natural surroundings that are about. As a matter of fact, just take a look at this painting here on the side, which was created in the year 1849 by a fellow named Asher Brown Durant. This is called Kindred Spirits, and if you really break down the painting, you will see man's relationship to the beauty that surrounds him. I really shouldn't deface the picture by drawing on it. Sorry about that. I should take that off, because that's not good. Nature is presented in all of her glory here, and the title of the painting, Kindred Spirits, shows that there must be some kind of relationship between man and his natural surroundings. Really quite beautiful. This is just one example of the Hudson River School of Art. This is a wonderful selection that mirrors some of the points that we were just making. First, let's take a look at the word Transcendentalism. Just its root, for example, the idea to transcend something. Most of us probably recognize the meaning of the word transcend. If you have to transcend your surroundings or transcend the difficulty that you are facing, it means you have to somehow go beyond what is presented in front of you. And so Transcendentalists believe that we needed to transcend or go beyond the physical reality, the material world, those things that are artificial, that are just appealing to the senses. We need to go beyond that and really get into the world of spiritual reality, get into the world of intuition, of mystical insight, of divinity within. Transcendentalism as a philosophical movement has that as its basic premise, that we need to go beyond materialism, go beyond artificiality, go beyond the material world to explore what's transcendent, the soul, the spirit, the divine. As an organization, it was a movement of writers and thinkers and philosophers that came together in New England, probably centered in Concord, Massachusetts. Some of the big names that are associated with the Transcendentalist Club are two of the authors that we're going to be studying, Ralph Waldo Emerson and Henry David Thoreau. And Margaret Fuller was in there, as well as Nathaniel Hawthorne and a few others. Our emphasis, our focus will be primarily on Emerson and Thoreau. Think of Emerson as the teacher and Thoreau as the student. Emerson is often called the father of Transcendentalism because he seems to have spoken of it before anybody else, or he's the first one to really present the ideas of Transcendentalism in his writing and in his lectures. Prior to this time, America was really just being a copycat of Great Britain. There really was no voice in the United States in terms of literature. Maybe Washington Irving becomes one of the first real speakers of what it means to be American. Walt Whitman will later tell us that the United States themselves are essentially the greatest poem. What a great line that is. Whitman you could include in the Transcendentalist Club too. We're going to be studying him in terms of the Civil War because he happened to be a nurse during the Civil War, and he wrote a good deal about Lincoln and the battles that were being fought, and he was actually working in a hospital down in Fredericksburg for a period of time. But you could throw him into the Transcendentalist Club too, especially with regard to his ideas and philosophy. But Emerson once said that this is his quote, "We have listened too long to the courtly muses of Europe. We will walk on our own feet, we will work with our own hands, and we will speak our own minds." You could say that this quote is his call for independence, not just in terms of being a separated country from Great Britain, but independence in terms of our artistic work, our literature, our philosophy. We are going to be a country that's building itself on principles never before seen in the history of humanity. This Declaration of Independence from 1776 ensures or assures the inalienable rights of every individual. These are the values of our new nation, and it's going to need a philosophy that will fit, that will minister to that concept. Okay, so stated previously, Transcendentalism is technically a philosophy, and it believed or it espoused that truth could only be reached by transcending or going beyond reason and getting into the world of the spirit, the world of the divine. So therefore, real knowledge is not going to come just from a book. It's not going to be coming from a teacher. It's going to be coming from deep within a human being. Emerson will call it that gleam of light that is within. Most of us will call it your gut. You probably have heard the expression your intuition. Listen to your intuition. This is what the Transcendentalists will prize above all else. What are some of its basic beliefs? Okay, well, as we continue, there's going to be this sense of the power of the individual. The need to rely on yourself. To not follow the crowd. You have to have the courage, according to Emerson, to be able to, here's his quote, insist on yourself and never imitate. It's more important to follow your intuition, your little gleam of light within you, than it is to just be a member of the crowd. And yet how difficult that is. And how common it is today to do the opposite. To just try to stay anonymous. To just try not to stand out. To just want to be accepted. Another basic idea in Transcendentalism is that man is inherently good. This is completely opposed to the theory of William Golding, whose novel you'll be reading in junior year. Maybe you know the novel. He believed that humanity has basic evil within. It is inherent in the human soul. So he takes a group of little boys and throws them on an island and shows you how in a couple of weeks they're going to revert to killing each other and hating each other, because deep down inside, that's what resides in the human soul. Well, Golding's philosophy is completely contrasted with the philosophy of those men and women who are transcendentalists. Like Native Americans, if you remember when we covered our myths, Transcendentalists believed in the unity of all creation. That I don't live on the earth, but I live with the earth. There is respect for all creatures, great and small. There is the belief that there is value to every living thing, and we are all connected by this divinity within ourselves. And that leads us to the last point. This kinship with nature will teach us that there's something greater than ourselves out there. If you can't get to an organized church If you can't get to a scheduled service, Emerson and Thoreau would say, then walk outside. Look at the natural surroundings. In nature, Emerson will write, the stars awaken a certain reverence or respect. That's where the secret to divinity rests. Go outside. Mankind cannot create a sunset. What's in there, what's in that scene, what's in that vision is divine. And that's the same spirit that's within you and me and all of us. We can know our God directly through experiencing nature. So let's take a look at our first author, Ralph Waldo Emerson. Birth dates 1803, died 1882. He was the primary figure of the Transcendental movement, and a lot of people call him the father of Transcendentalism. He was a philosopher, a scholar, a minister, a teacher, all of these wonderful things. And he really put on paper the idea of self-reliance after suffering many tragedies in his life. His father died when he was only 8 years old. Then his brother died. He had two brothers who were mentally ill. His first wife, Ellen, died suddenly. His son, Waldo, died of scarlet fever. He himself had lung disease. He suffered from periodic blindness. I mean, I could go on. No wonder he proposed the need for self-reliance, right? No wonder he had the line, insist on yourself and never imitate, right? He believed that every person had unique abilities and a special purpose. You should imitate no one. Just trust in your own abilities, because society's constantly working against you. It demands conformity. So in order to be great, you have to be self-reliant. You have to be a nonconformist. You have to not be afraid to be misunderstood. And it takes a lot of courage to do that. Emerson was influenced a great deal by the Hindu tradition and the belief that humans share this oversoul, this immutable, unchangeable, has no beginning, has no end spirit within. He finds that it's very easy to come in contact with that soul when he's outdoors in nature itself. On the right-hand side, here's one of the famous quotes: "To be yourself in a world that's constantly trying to make you something else is really the greatest accomplishment." And we could talk about this more in class, but just think about advertising. Think about what advertisers try to do in order to sell you a product. Is the product really that great, or are they just trying to sell you the idea that if you have this product, then all of a sudden you're going to be accepted by society. You're going to be looked upon by society as being really cool or really in, or whatever the common, terminology is of the day. But to really just be your own person, it's not an easy thing to do when all the messages that you're getting are asking you to just follow the crowd. Eventually, we're going to get to the essay Self-Reliance, but our first essay that we're going to be covering is called Nature. It happens to be one of my favorites, as a matter of fact. And although the language is very challenging, and we're going to have to get through the vocabulary and the diction, within the essay itself are some really powerful questions. Questions that maybe we can talk about in terms of a classroom setting, but how big of a role does nature play in your life? We live here in a pretty congested area, and although we're not in New York City, we're certainly surrounded by commercial lighting and buildings and houses that are right upon each other. But do you set aside time to spend a few moments just looking at the beauty of the natural world? I think that we've moved away from that too much. And for myself, if I don't get outside every day, I know I am a beast. There's something about being outdoors that really speaks to me. It may not speak to you, but it certainly speaks to me. And this is something that Emerson will explore in his essay entitled Nature. Does your mood affect the way you see the world too? If you're sad, do you look up at the stars and feel that the stars are cold and sad because that's your disposition? Or do you look out at nature and it uplifts you, no matter what your feelings happen to be at that time? Well, as a literary genre, nature is an essay. And It sets forth the major ideas of transcendentalism, especially the beauty and the power of the natural world. So even if you're not necessarily someone who interacts on a daily basis with nature, and maybe the only time you're really outside is when you're getting in and out of your car in order to go to another place, I'm hoping that perhaps you could take something out of the essay that will speak to you. But I'm really excited about getting started, so hopefully the next time we meet, we can begin this long essay together.